Welcome to
Another
an
edition of the Best Business Minds, where we interview business leaders and academics who write thought-provoking books. I'm Marc Kramer, a serial entrepreneur who consults with family businesses and entrepreneurs, and currently I'm teaching entrepreneurship at Vinh University in Hanoi, Vietnam. Today's guest is Eric Charran, author of the book, Have You Ever Had a Boss That Succeeding in a Dysfunctional Workplace? I love the title. That's what drew me to the book. Eric, welcome.
Thanks for having me on, Mark. It's great to be here.
Eric, let's start off with you telling us about your professional background, how you got to where you're at right now.
Sure, happy to. So I started out life as a technologist, and so I joined Microsoft back in 2005. I think the first thing I did for the company was to write Hewlett-Packard print drivers for Windows. I then moved into our field organization and spent about 10 years there, where I was working to deploy Microsoft technologies at the top 50 companies around the world. I worked my way up to chief architect there, so I was a technology translator, making complex things seem simple for business folks so that they could make decisions and helping them digitally transform, especially in an age of disruptiveness around artificial intelligence and a world of, that was moving rapidly towards apps. I helped establish the Office of Responsible AI, which was focused on making ethical decisions around recognizing bias and discrimination inside of machine learning models. I then moved into Azure, where I was a chief architect, and so my role was across 235 services, how to get the components of Azure to do the same things the same way, like logging and governance and things like that. I then transitioned into industry, where I was looking after, building artificial intelligence strategies around generative AI, while combining that with strategies to achieve better analytics and data science based on data platforms. And I'm currently at Intuit, where I'm looking after product engineering and architecture for data for that organization.
Now, why did you write this book? And what was the driving force for you?
Yeah, great question. So I've been around for a while, Mark. I'm a Gen Xer, and so what I began to realize as I started going into like maybe mid-career, that there were lessons that I learned, and that I found that some early in career folks really were struggling with. So I found myself giving people advice on, hey, I've been in your spot before. I've had managers like this before. Here's what works well with managers that display these tactics, these traits, these behavioral patterns, or these what I call in the book is unhelpful behaviors. And what's interesting is, I don't like to ascribe people as being bad leaders or bad managers. They just have a unhealthy, unhelpful set of tools that they've learned from their managers. And so back when I got started, there were no terms like psychological safety, bringing your whole self to work. If your manager thought the best way to get results was to walk down the hall of cubes and yell at you, then you just, you put your head down and you powered through it and you delivered. We now are a much more enlightened professional society, I feel. And so we now know that those are the things that they believe are going to make them successful. So I was sitting around with a couple of my VP peers, and we were just complaining and venting and commiserating around some of the unhelpful behaviors that we had encountered from a couple of our managers. And we started to give them these funny little names like, the amnesiac, or they're always surprised, or, they can't remember anything, or they just, surface and spew out a whole bunch of things and then just dive deep beneath the waves and you never hear from them again until they come up and they swoop and poop on you again. So um, somebody was like, hey, somebody should write this down. I said, you know what, I'll write this down because I have the feeling that it's going to be useful to people that are earlier in career, but also simultaneously people that are leaders and are managers. It's kind of like a mirror. You can actually hold it up to yourself and say like, hey, am I this type of leader? So that's where the genesis of the book came from.
So, starting with chapter one, what are the most common signs that a workplace is suffering from a dysfunctional leadership?
I think it's a combination of things, and I don't know if you could actually say that, hey, this person or this thing is dysfunctional. I think it's got to be more from a individual or team-based perspective. So the idea, I think, is the best way to recognize dysfunction is whether or not there are alternative ways to achieve results. And if the methods that are being used to achieve results make you feel good and bring energy and make you want to dive in, or are the ways that results are being achieved and the culture of the workplace, is it one which saps your energy, makes you jaded, makes you wish that you could work someplace else, makes you kind of count down the days in which, to the weekend? Or do you dread Mondays? So those are all signs in which, from a professional perspective, maybe things are not the best. And maybe that starts with leadership. And then it gives you the opportunity to examine leadership. So in the early chapters of the book, I talk about the surprised manager, the one who's perpetually shocked by events, often reacting with disbelief to problems that should have been anticipated, lacking situational awareness, fail to plan, and it leads to constant crisis mode leadership. And I think I try to use a narrative example in the book in which you follow characters through these scenarios. And by the way, all of the scenarios are ones that have happened to me. So there's true stories behind all of these. But one is which, you get that 7:30 a.m. calendar invite from your manager that there's a executive presentation later in the day that you and your peers have been preparing for and signaling that you got it all week. But now you're in the back, you're in a Starbucks and you're trying to join a Zoom call, or you're trying to tell your kids to be quiet as you drop off at daycare while you're on a call with your manager and you're basically trying to tell them, yeah, we sent you this last week. You've had it for days. We're already set up. And, again, it's like that emergency on their a unpreparedness on their part becomes an emergency on everybody else's.
How does poor leadership ripple through team dynamics and company culture? We've all seen that. Wrong leader as we see now, can ruin everything for an organization that's even been around a long time with a good, strong, positive culture.
Yeah, I think that's really a core challenge. And I think if you ask any leader, their job is like, yes, I'd love to be well liked. I want my pulse scores when the employees rate me to be super high, and I want job satisfaction to be super high. But these are people that are under enormous pressure. These are people that are under pressure to deliver fiscal results, to do it with a minimum set of resources in an era of shrinking budgets. And the philosophy is to do more with less. And that results in leakage. And what I mean by leakage is, hey, I know what my objectives are, my quantitative objectives. I know maybe even know what my qualitative objectives are, but the tools that I have in my toolbox on how to inspire and lead a team are the ones that are lacking and that are potentially even introducing toxic culture into the team, the very team that I need to achieve these results. The challenge is many leaders are not self-aware enough to kind of question the way in which they go about their establishment of culture, the allocation of resources, and how they lead. Many leaders say that, hey, my manager, who is now a VP, or my VP manager, who's now an SVP, this is how they led. And I see them getting promoted. And so that means that the tools in their toolbox must be the ones that are successful here in this team, in this group, and in this organization. But what a lot of leaders don't realize is that there are better ways to inspire teams, to build positive culture, to achieve those really, really hard results, but doing it in a way that your manager didn't know to do. So I often talk about my son, who is a student athlete, much, much better than I was and when I was in high school. But when somebody messes up a play, the entire team does a lap, right? And you might question the utility of a coaching technique like that, given what we know about organizational dynamics and performance nowadays. But coaches coach how they were coached, managers manage how they were managed, and leaders lead how they've been led. It takes somebody with introspection and self-awareness to say, maybe these aren't the most helpful ways to get the results because I'm injecting toxicity into my organization.
Yeah, I agree with you with that. And now young people have so many options around the world. They don't have to go and take, when I graduated in 82, you had to take a job within drive time of you. And then as every decade has gone on, the opportunities have expanded to being global. Somebody in
Mhm.
Vietnam can easily get a job in Chicago and just telecommute.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really one of the core tenets as I wrap up the what I was wrapping up the book to kind of just give people some things to think about. One of the things that I talk about is knowing your worth, which basically means that you don't necessarily have to take it. I think folks that are early in career, they become kind of enamored or they hold their managers in high regard, and they should in certain circumstances. These are the people that have their performance in their hands, their fiscal rewards in their hands. And so there's this certain reverence that early in career folks kind of paint their managers with. But at the same time, the organization needs you, and you are worth something. And knowing your worth can give you the opportunity to say, you know what? I've tried to implement some of the recommendations, maybe in the book that Eric wrote, for example, and elsewhere. And I'm just throwing more good energy after bad results. And I know my worth, and now's the time for me to select a new leader, a new team, or a new organization.
Can dysfunction ever be a catalyst for innovation and growth?
Maybe eventually. I think dysfunction has to be dealt with from an organization perspective. If it is a catalyst for innovation and growth, I think the first step is that the dysfunction has to be dealt with and healed so that the organization can innovate and grow. I don't know if innovation in the face of dysfunction or as a result of dysfunction is ever going to feel as good as it is when there's a positive culture in place. I do feel that it's possible to innovate under dysfunction, but at the same time, I don't think that that's sustainable. I don't think that that's how you want to innovate. I think that that's what a lot of managers that are leading with unhelpful tools and unhelpful behaviors believe. And I don't think that if you ask them, hey, maybe I'm not acting dysfunctional, but if you look at the state of your pulse results on a yearly basis, or how people are being either crushed and or kind of marginalized within your teams, or what the energy pulse is from your team members, I don't think it's sustainable. I think the best path is to recognize dysfunction, deal with it constructively through empathy, and then innovate.
How often have you ever seen where the leader puts up great numbers, but the company, and it's because the product is just so good or so in demand, and yet the rest of the company is suffering under this? How do you still make that change?
I think that starts with institutional leadership within the organization. It starts at the top. Like, what is the mindset that you want to have? What is the culture that you want to have as an organization? So I think you many folks have seen maybe the 2000 era graphic of Microsoft with different divisions pointing guns at each other. From having been around a while, that's exactly what it was like. It was team versus team, maybe two teams working on the same problem on two sides of a conference table with a leader saying, okay, you go, tell me why you're better. Okay, you go, tell me why you're better. And it would be a knife fight in those conference room sessions. That was the culture at the time. And you might say that that was innovation under dysfunction. And again, if you push people hard enough, then you'll get results. But that's just not the way that's not the force multiplier or the step change function that's going to be required for an organization to grow. Case in point, when Satya Nadella came to the organization, I mean, he'd been there for the entire time, but when he came into leadership, he said, I don't want people to have to try to fight. I don't like this culture of us versus ourselves. It should be, we should adopt a growth mindset, and we should embrace collaboration. We should focus on learning rather than what you know. And I think that that type of cultural shift was one in which we kind of completely, it was a sea change for the organization. And so I think that in that scenario, it became less of a people pointing guns at each other, but we even retooled how we assess performance. It wasn't what you accomplished that was important, but it was how you accomplished it, and how you worked with others. They were equal three parts of any achievement that you had to have at Microsoft. And I think that was a really great way of saying that achieving results is not good enough if you leave a trail of bodies behind you.
Yeah, I mean, Steve Ballmer, his leadership has been a case study on how not to lead. I mean, most and was like a dead 10 years for Microsoft when the current CEO now has tripled the value of Microsoft, and now it's $1 trillion company, and people are wanting to work with Microsoft. When I taught at the Wharton School, students came there and said, "I don't want to go back to that culture."
Yep. Yep. It's true. Having been there during the 2014 was kind of like this sea change. And in fact, one of my favorite all-time books was something that's Saatchi required all of the leadership to read. And when he was trying to institute this change, he kind of called all his leaders from all across the world to a leadership conference. And so I had the book on my table and it was sat there for 6 months. I said, "Hey, I'm Eric Charran. Of course, I've got a growth mindset." But right before the conference, they said, make sure you read it because he's going to ask you questions on it. And so I read it on the plane, and the first 20 pages completely changed my life, right? Like, if you're not able to admit the last time we failed out loud and with pride, then you're not growing, right? And I thought that struck me super hard because in the old culture, you had to make any failure sound like a success, right? So you had to fail, the phrase was failing upward, and it was a real thing.
Why do some leaders thrive in constant crisis mode?
Actually, I write about this because I work for a leader like that. I called it the firefighter archetype. This boss kind of just thrives in chaos. They pride themselves on, I call it a saving the day complex in the book. Even if they created the disaster to begin with through ineptitude or neglect or just the fact that, hey, there are imperfect systems that can be fixed within the business or within the organization, they just choose not to because if they're not saving the day, then what are they really doing? Right. That's really how they're thinking about it. And so they become addicted to urgency. And they actively outright resist planning and preventative systems and being able to say that, hey, I don't want to have another issue or I don't want to have another incident. I want to try to get rid of all of these things and they're preventable. There's technologies to help us do this and governance practices. These individuals will not be receptive to that. And again, it's a self-awareness bar that they need to hit in order to figure out that they need to change. And many times, if you're working for managers like these, you kind of have to bring that self-awareness out of them through empathy. But the core to this is realizing that these people feel useful when they are putting out fires. And if there are no fires, then what is it that they actually do? What is their personal brand? How are they going to deliver results to the organization? And so there is this subconscious fear almost that, like, if there are no more fires, then I'm not going to get a great review. And what do I actually do here? In actuality, and sometimes leadership praises that, right? If you're in a move fast and break things culture, fires are going to erupt, and you do need a person that is good in a crisis. But what you really need is a person that can learn from those crises and then prevent against those and put systems of prevention in place. And when leadership changes from move fast and break things to let's create a sustainable, revenue generating, profitable business, those people realize that every fire leaves fire damage. And I don't want the fire damage, right? I don't want people having to wake up at midnight or 2 a.m. to code fixes so that money moves through my systems. Because that's damage on those individuals and those people and the systems and when those things are down. I want to prevent these fires. And that's really a change in leadership and the way that people are acknowledged.
Question from the audience. Today, we often see very young leaders in fields like biotech, software, or the internet, people with exceptional technical expertise, but little preparation for managing people. From your perspective, what common mistakes do technically brilliant but inexperienced bosses make, and how can organizations or employees help bridge the gap between technical skill and human leadership?
Oh wow. This strikes close to home because this was me, right? Like I loved technology. I loved being technically deep. I still do, and I love being in the details. What you have to realize is, or what I soon realized, is that the people that are making the decisions, the people that have the budgets, they are as not as enamored with the technology, with the detail, with the processes, with the choices that you're making as you are. And because of that, your job as a deep technical person deeply technical person, or people that derive energy from and being ensconced in that world like I did, you have to realize that your job and the people that are successful when they have that component to their professional identity become successful because they can make complex things seem simple. They can take hard technical choices, challenging decisions, technology and science focused challenges, and really frame it in a way that is accessible to a layperson or to a business decision maker. And again, that's not saying that these folks don't have the same, intellectual capacity as deeply technical people. It's just that their focus is completely different. And the people that are successful are the ones that realize that being ensconced in technical details it might give you energy, but to the folks that have to make choices, it may not drive their energy and often doesn't. And as a result, your job is to take that, wrap it up for them, put it in speak that they can understand, make sure that you tell a great story and that it'll illustrate the stakes and help them make those choices.
Yeah, I think that's very important advice also from when they're trying to raise capital and they get too deep into the technology and not talk about the problem that they're solving and the strategy of being able to get clients. It totally works against them. I have two
Mhm.
young entrepreneurs here in Vinton University that have already made in 2 years, already have over 1 million in cash and growing. And they spoke to a group of MBA students, and they said the one thing they learned was nobody cares about the technical part. They just care about what the end result will be from using their technology, but they don't want to know how they arrived at that technology. And they're only
Completely.
22 years old, and I thought it was very astute of them to understand that already.
Yeah, completely agree with that. And the most confusing thing for technologists that love the technology is when people ask you about the technology and you reply with an answer and their eyes just kind of glaze over, right? So they're just looking for the dial tone. I hear blockchain is really hot. Is blockchain in your solution? I hear generative AI is really hot. Is that in your solution? And when you start to respond, you perceive it as a signal that they're interested and they want more details, and they really don't. They just want to check off. Is AI in there? Is blockchain in there? Is
Right.
are LLMs in there? And that's the end of it. So it can be confusing as well, I found.
How can employees stay focused and productive when their boss is always putting out fires? I see that
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah, it is a big challenge. So in the book, what I write about is for anyone that's worked for a firefighter boss that loves thriving on in that world, it's difficult to be productive, especially if you are on the fire team, right? Like if you are fighting the fires, and you're up at all hours of the night, it becomes very frustrating to try to do your job and to try to steer the organization in the right direction to try to heal some of the causes of these problems if your manager is silently or maybe not so silently fighting against any types of preventative systems or planning that you're doing. And so the question becomes, how do you change or influence your manager so that you can be as productive as you think that you can be or you know you can be? The way to do that, it's all of these manager archetypes I write about is through empathy, really understanding somebody's motivation. And then once you understand their motivation, you can actually kind of just say, hey, I think I understand your point of view. I think I understand that, it's thrilling fighting fires and the organization praises that. But maybe if we shifted the organization and we grew the organization to a different metric of success, which is days without incident. What if instead of how many fires that we put out, we can say, hey, our days without incident have been, it started out as maybe 15, now it's at 30, now it's at 100, now it's been a year without an incident. And those are all based on things that we put together. Maybe that's the metric that makes you valuable, not how many fires that you extinguished and left damage behind, but how many fires you prevented. And but you're not going to be successful in changing that person's perspective unless you really understand their motivation and you kind of give a voice to that. So empathizing is key because it puts the person in a position where they're more willing to listen to your ideas.
What motivates a leader to operate in secrecy and sabotage others?
Yeah. I've actually, to be completely honest with you, between you, me, and your audience, um, there have been times where you can take a virtuous path and you can take a dark path. And those times are when you've got a initiative that you're super proud of, you're super, you may have even experienced implementing it in past lives or past organizations, and it's so clear that your initiative can solve some of the problems that are in front of you, your team, and the organization. And there are just other political players out there that are just trying to stomp on it and to try to drag it down because they want their people, their initiatives to win out and to achieve, success and capture the budget that might have gone towards yours. So the immediate instinct was like, okay, it's time for me to roll up my sleeves and play dirty. Now I need to play the game of dirty politics and all the tactics that they're doing. I have to throw them back, and it is a very, very easy road to take. Um, but it really depends on what your personal philosophy is. I I have I'm proud to say that I've resisted those urges and I've been successful for it by taking people that operate in secrecy and operate in political opposition to you and making them allies. And one core truth in how I've done that, doing coalition building, is many of these people are always asking, "What have you done for me lately?" If they don't say it out loud, every time that you show up into a Zoom meeting, that's what they're asking. They're going around the Zoom meeting going like, "What have these people done for me lately?" And so if you're able to kind of have a position a good answer for that. Hey, here's what I did for you lately. And then I think together we can do X, Y, and Z. That's really the way I've been able to take the high road and not have to result to dirty political infighting and operating in my own secret bubble and trying to politically assassinate people. It's just not the way that I wanted to live.
Yeah, and so I wonder, how can professionals protect themselves from these covert undermining?
The number one thing to do is to always, and I hate to say this, but I spend a lot of time doom prognosticating, which is anticipating what are the threat vectors? Where are they going to come from? Who's going to look at this particular initiative, this particular product, this project, whatever it is, and who is going to feel threatened by it? And who do I need to bring along? Who do I need to invite into the boat with me as we sail down this river? Versus push off from the shore and wave at them and be like, all right, see you later, we're going to go solve this problem and I'm on the rocket ship or I'm in the boat and you're not. So bring people into the tent, whatever the euphemism is, the tent, the umbrella, the boat, whatever it is, but bring them along and find ways to do that. And the best way to do that is to collaborate, and the best way to do that is to just say, hey, what are you working on that I can help with? And if I help you with this, maybe I can get your perspective on my initiative and we can work together on it. And talking about mutual benefit. This is going to be mutually beneficial for both of us from a career perspective, from a recognition point of view, from a problem solving point of view, and how we're going to change the organization or the industry.
Is it possible to expose this behavior without damaging your own reputation?
Yeah, it is, but it is a art more than it is a science. The best advice that I got is nothing speaks better than results. So even if you are successful at exposing somebody that's operating in secret or operating in opposition to you, it's never a good thing because you come out looking just as dirty as the person that's actually that's the danger. You come out just as dirty with as much dirt on you as the person that's actually engaging in the provocative behavior. The best way I found to deal with this is to say, hey, I want to get your advice. I'm having a challenge with this group, this team, this individual, and I've tried all these things, and I just need advice because of what I'm seeing is this behavior, and I'm not sure how to deal with it. In that scenario, you're framing it differently. You're saying, I'm taking ownership. I really do want to deal with this, but I want to appeal to your advice as my manager or as my skip level manager on how I should deal with this individual coming from this team. And even just by nuance, just by not mentioning the person by name, mentioning them by role, and then getting the leader to be like, is this person? And you could say, they're one of the individuals I'm having a challenge with. But you're not necessarily tattling, you're not throwing them under the bus. you don't come out looking dirty in that scenario because you're asking for advice on how you can, kind of bring everybody along. I think that's the best way to deal with it.
What happens when leadership is physically or emotionally absent?
This is something I wrote about in the attack sub archetype, which is the leadership will kind of just catch you unawares in the hallway, in Slack, at the airport, at one of your kids, little league games, and say, "Hey, there's this meeting coming up. We have, there's a board level meeting. I need a slide deck, and I need it right away, and I want to look at it on Sunday." Listen, that's always going to happen, right? Work-life balance is important, but sometimes they're just emergencies. And so you kind of respond with questions like, okay, happy to. Who's going to be in the meeting? What's the subject? What kind of slide do I need to prepare? How many? What's the length of time? All these things are going to help you be successful. Meeting the ask, and they are gone, right? They have submerged beneath the waves like an attack sub, right? And so when they surface again, they're like, oh gosh, this is not at all what I envisioned. How could you miss the boat but by such a wide margin? And you're like, I asked all these questions to try to get specificity to deliver the best work product, but you were not there. And so the biggest challenge, I think, was trying to figure out how to deal with somebody like this. And the best way to do that for me was, again, emotionally identifying with why they are absent and why they are unavailable. And it's largely because these people are oversubscribed. They just have so much to do. And so, for a boss like the attack sub, they avoid confrontation in public, but they may even work to undermine, criticize, and do all that stuff kind of just in spurts. The goal is to say, here's the impact of this behavior on you, on my team's ability to meet objectives, to deliver valuable work products. When you do this behavior, this is what happens, and this is how we feel, and this is how it impacts the quality of the work. What you're going to need to do is to, at defined intervals, make sure that you're touching base, right? And so that level of guidance and growing your manager and managing upwards is absolutely necessary across all these management archetypes. But that's kind of the way that I dealt with a lot of these, is to try to find the motivation, put yourself in their shoes, figure out why they're using these unhelpful tools, and then tell them, make them aware of the impact, and say, there's a better way. Let me help you. Let me support you in this change.
It's all about them at the end of the day.
It ends up being, unfortunately, but yes,
How do you lead yourself when your manager won't?
it's a great question. The one way to think about it is many of us have been in positions where you are the leader of the team. There is a manager above you that's responsible for the team and has the management scope and the leadership scope. But we've all seen instances where the manager is just minding the store, or they're just checked out, or they don't have the skill or technical ability to actually manage the organization or manage the team to deliver results. And so it falls on maybe a couple people's shoulders or might fall on your shoulders. And in many instances, you might begin to feel like I'm propping up the manager, right? And if I were to leave, this entire house of cards would collapse. Those are real things. But again, I think that the best way to deal with that is to make your manager your advocate, make them your amplification platform, make them your ally, regardless of whether they're qualified or not, regardless of whether or not they are effective leaders. If you can actually lead and grow your manager at the same time while respecting the position that they're in, but leverage the position that they're in to amplify your own initiatives and your own perspectives. That's the best way to do it, in my opinion. That's how I've been successful at it.
Can a team thrive without direct leadership, or does it always need a guiding hand? And I think this has been seen during the pandemic when people were not interacting in person.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that every team has a certain degree of autonomy and the ability to collaborate without interference and without direct injection of a guiding hand. But at the same time, I do feel that a team needs to constantly calibrate against expectations, to constantly make sure that they're on mission, to constantly check in to make sure that the impact and the results that they're delivering are ones that are going to be valued by the organization. So I don't know if I would kind of lump that in under guidance or calibration. I think that there's a degree to which teams need it. So a team can be perfectly happy producing things and may take a turn or a left turn or maybe right turn or wherever. And everybody within the team thinks it's the right way to go, but they might be off road in terms of where the organization needs them to be. So I would say that teams are that don't require a lot of guidance, that are self-directed, need to calibrate, and a manager's role is to kind of calibrate them to make sure that their efforts are aligning with organizational priorities and organizational results and expectations. Guidance comes when they're not sure how to calibrate their efforts. Some teams you might say, "Hey, you know what? You're drifting here. You need to focus on this." They'll be like, "Hey, got it, we're going to do X, Y, and Z." And as a leader, you go, great, that's exactly what's prescribed. When you calibrate the team and they're like, oh, okay, well, I think that maybe this is what we should do. And if that's not the right direction, that's really where guidance comes in as a leader, in which you need to say, no, hey, why don't you do, you know, one, two, and three instead of A, B, and C? So I think it's a interplay between calibration and guidance as required for independent teams.
What's the psychology behind leaders who take credit and dodge blame? God, you see that quite a bit.
You do see that quite a bit. I am not a clinical psychologist or sociologist, but I do have, observations. Um, in my career, that actually has not been that frequent. It's usually this. I would imagine the psychology is that those people know that they're not delivering, but they know that they need to be able to be looked at upon by leaders within the organization as valuable. And so potentially, quite tragically, maybe their only recourse is to say that, hey, I'm going to attach myself to this person or this team's results and say that if it weren't for me, they wouldn't have gotten done. I supported them, or I did this, or I'm somehow responsible for it. And it comes from maybe like imposter syndrome, professional insecurities, the fact that you just, were lazy and didn't do what you're supposed to do. And now you're trying to do what we used to call Microsoft called licking the cookie. It's all part of the same motivation. And so when that happens, you have a choice. You have a choice to be like, no, hey, this no fair. This person really didn't contribute anything. I don't know what they're talking about. We did this in spite of them, in fact. But again, you don't come out looking great from that level of discourse. Um, the best way to then to kind of talk about it is to say, here's what my team did, here's what we did, here are the challenges that we faced, here's who we had to convince, and just talk about the fantastic work that you did. If you try to kind of, play dirty pool, it's a way to go. I'm not good at it, and I don't want to be good at that type of organizational, influence or dynamics.
Such negative time spent, right? Uh,
Right.
how can employees tactfully reclaim that recognition for their contributions? I think that's what most people really worry about is they just want credit for what they've done. They're not
Yeah.
looking to get credit for something they haven't done.
Credit actually trumps monetary rewards in a lot of organizations, in my experience. So it is definitely a currency of its own, and everyone deserves credit for the work that they've done. My advice has always been make sure that you have skip level connections with your manager's manager. Make sure that your manager's manager is obviously okay with it or is at least aware of it and say, listen, I think that in every organization I've been with, I've always had skip level discussions with my manager. And while your manager's job is to amplify your efforts in service of the organizational goal, the team's goal, you certainly also deserve and should have a platform in which you can speak to leadership directly about what it is that your team has done, what you delivered that you're proud of, and how you're going to grow it in the future and how it's going to contribute to the organization's success, the division, whatever, and then that manager's success as well, and to get guidance. And so that to me is the best way to make sure that again, it's not about reclaiming credit. It's about validating and with authenticity that your team was the team, you were the individual, your contributions actually mattered in this space and it brought you a lot of energy. That's, I think, a message that managers would love to hear. And it's that positivity that actually gets a skip level manager to be like, this is the person that I can count on. And they might go back to their direct and say, is this person in your succession plan, for example?
Is there a way to turn a spotlight seeker into a collaborative ally? And I think you've kind of addressed some of that throughout this conversation.
Yeah, yeah. To me, it all goes back to, and that's my zero set operation, right? It's to turn potential enemies into collaborative allies by answering the question, "What have you done for me lately?" And then saying that, "Hey, let's get in the boat together and let's win together." Because when you win, I win, and vice versa. The way to do that is through emotional intelligence and through empathy, being able to get that person to be like, hey, Eric really does understand what it's like to sit behind my desk. He does understand what's important to me. And he's offering a perspective or a pattern of a strategy in which we can both get what we want. At least I can get what I want. So maybe now I don't have to treat him as an adversary. Maybe I can treat him as an ally. But it all goes through that door of emotional intelligence and empathy and empathizing with the people that are probably the most antagonizing in your professional life, right? Like that's the number one thing. Once you get them into a position where they're emotionally willing to listen, that's key. What I found is that people don't make logical choices. They make emotional ones and they seek logic to back it up. And if you try to subvert it with logic and reason, the emotional context kind of wins out and they go deeper into digging in their heels. It's not until you establish that emotional understanding and empathy, well, are they willing to be like, you know what, let me let my guard down and listen to what this person has to say.
The difference between the attention to detail and controlling behavior. I think we all get driven nuts by that micromanager.
Yes. So a micromanager is somebody that just doesn't have the right tools in their toolbox. They are at their core, in my experience, they are super concerned. They want to be successful. They want the team to be successful, and they want you to be successful. But in many instances, maybe they were an engineer and you're an engineer now. Maybe they were a researcher and now they're a manager now and you're in their role before. And it's that dangerous mix of I know how I did the job. I know that it's easier for me to do that job than to teach you how to do it or to tell you how I want it done. And so I'm going to do it, or I'm going to make sure that I move your hands for you in the way that I would have moved my hands in this role. And I can't let go because I know with such certainty how it needs to be done and the shape of the work to the point where I'm going to actually treat you as a puppet so that you can do it the way that I did it. And yeah, I'll get to my leadership and management responsibilities eventually, but I know this space, I know this area, I know the outcome, and so I want to make sure that it's quality based on how I see it. So that's usually the motivation. The challenge is that those are all false equivalencies. It is a failure of leadership to say it's going to take me longer to explain it to you than if I just did it myself. That's always going to be the case. And in a certain example, a certain scenario, a mature leader is going to have to be like, you know what? They're not going to do it exactly the way that I was going to have done it, but maybe it's going to be good enough. Maybe it might even be better, right? Because that presupposes that you are the absolute expert in what the assignment is or what the work product is. Maybe leveraging the talent of people that are earlier in career in you, and they'll be able to impress you. So it's getting people to see that micromanagement is really just a way in which you're trying to accommodate for challenges and in terms of uncertainty. And then saying that, hey, if you release your hands a little bit here, and we touch base with you and let you know that things are making the right progress, but we'll actually do it. It allows them to be secure in the fact that they can actually help shape and guide the results. But actually, making somebody your puppet is not a productive way to do it.
Are there industries where micromanagement is actually necessary?
I have worked across 7 or 8 industrial verticals in my time, in my professional career, and I've never seen an instance where micromanagement is a long-term a productive strategy. It might be in the short term, but eventually, for the person being micromanaged, it usually is a destructive, energy sapping proposition that's going to cost you talent. It's also going to burn out the managers, the people that are actually doing the micromanagement, because if they're focused on one element of their portfolio of responsibilities, then they're neglecting the other portfolios, or they themselves are being are being threatened by burnout because they're trying to manage everybody at the detail level across their, their portfolio of responsibilities. So I can tell you that maybe there are. If there are, I've never seen it in my 25 plus years at being a professional.
How do you stay grounded when your boss constantly shifts priorities?
Oh yes. So this was I write about this in the book. It's called the LIFO, the last in first out. And there was an example I give in the book of every time an EVP went to talk to the board and the C-level execs, whatever they came up with in that meeting, which was a monthly meeting, became the number one priority for an organization. And as a result of that, what ended up happening was this person would come out of this meeting and be like, okay, here are the new set of commandments down from on high. Stop everything that you're doing and now focus on these. And we would all be like, well, hey, we didn't finish these other ones, but these other ones are super important. They relate to security and guardrails and AI and meeting customer needs and securing customer data. And if we stop all those things and switch again, we're going to have to again, we're not number one, we're not going to finish the stuff that's important to the organization. And now we're going to work for 30 days on this until you have another meeting and you're going to tell us that these other priorities come out. And what it took us a long time to do was to empathize with this manager. This manager valued harmony amongst all else. And harmony in that perspective was being compliant with what leadership, people that were institutionally above them in the organization, kind of described as important. And instead of saying, hey, you know what, if I take I think that this initiative that you're describing is important, but if I switch tracks to focus on that, here's what's not going to get done. And that's fully what this leadership was expecting, right? This leadership was expecting this person to bring them pros and cons and trade-offs and say, hey, I can't do this now, but here's when I can get this done, rather than just blind harmony-based compliance and then promising that you're going to deliver these things and then delivering nothing, right? Because you never finish something. So empathy and understanding that person's motivation, saying that harmony is number one, allowed us to say that, hey, you're not being disharmonious when you tell them the benefit of working on something new versus the trade-offs and the cost of abandoning what you've already been working on. In fact, if you value harmony, your job is to equip them with that full understanding of what they're asking, and that is of being more service to them than you just saying yes and then leaking the fact that you can't we didn't finish anything. So again, it's all, and I feel like I'm repeating myself, but it's all like wrapped up in emotional identification, using empathy to understand their motivation, to trying to help grow them by saying that, hey, I get that you want harmony, but actually harmony is more derived from helping these people make the right choices.
Now, question from the audience. How should a person speak with manager's manager without risking making his own manager angry and any backlash? And that is a real tough one. And
Yeah,
I've seen where even good managers, people go over their head, and you can't help but to be angry because you feel like they didn't give you a chance. They didn't respect you. And then
that's
there's
right.
some managers that are just bad managers, and you feel like you need to go over the head, but then they'll be vindictive.
These are all real considerations. So I think I touched on this a little earlier. The number one thing to do is to create a channel for feedback. And largely the way that I would address it is to do everything in full view of your manager. So the first thing to do is you can't go over their heads. That I've never experienced a scenario where that has ever worked out, and I've never done it because I've seen people do it and it just ends in disaster. So the number one thing to do is to certainly get over the injustice of the situation. This manager that you're wrestling with, this coworker, They are inept. They are challenging. They are volatile. They have all these, strange behaviors that are counterintuitive to the organization's goals. But you have to process that injustice and then figure out how you can actually be seen as a leader, a collaborator that can lead people through these challenges. So in terms of how you address the feedback at the skip level, just say, hey, I've anywhere I've been, I've always had a skip level meeting just to make sure that I have a good understanding of what your expectations are, what the organization's expectations are, and just say, I plan to establish this. Let me know if you have a challenge with that. The second thing to do is in those conversations, and I think I touched on this earlier, make sure that you are not throwing anybody under the bus. Make sure that when you are talking about an inept manager or having a challenge with an individual, that you're seeking advice. And don't name the individual unless they ask. Just say, and because it's apparent to managers who's doing a great job and who is not. In some instances, if they're being carried by their team, um, it might seem like that's masked, but many managers or your skip level manager will know who has to grow how. And so, whether you name that person or not, if you try to talk to them and say that, hey, there's this situation going on with this leader, and I'm having a challenge, and I'd love to get your perspective on it, that ends up being more positive because you're seeking collaboration and you're seeking growth without trying to say, "Did you hear what this person did? I can't believe this. We have to do something about it." So it's all in how you frame the challenge. And again, not throwing somebody under the bus, asking for advice, honestly describing the situation, saying, "What would you do if you were me?" These are all, and here's what I think, by the way. And then say, "What's your advice on on what my plan is?" That's always going to be beneficial. You certainly don't want to go to your managers or your skip level managers with problems and say, "How should I solve this?" That's not what I'm saying. But you can ask for advice. You can tell them what your plan is and how you plan to deal with it, and then ask for their opinion of your plan.
Can adaptability become a superpower, or does it just lead to burnout?
Adaptability, I believe, in my career, from my experience, is a superpower. I've always told my teams that you can either, when a change happens, and it always happens, and it always does, you can either resist the change and be swept up by or subject to it, or you can lean in and be a part of it and lead through the change. And I've always found that accepting the change and leaning into it is much better than becoming subject to the change. And so, for my opinion, adaptability, flexibility, finding new opportunities when somebody's moved your cheese, those are definitely a tier one survival skill. Does it lead to burnout? Absolutely. If you are overperforming, if you are catering to, and being subjected to, some of the unhelpful behaviors of your managers, and you feel that there's no recourse, if you feel that you don't have tools in your toolbox to manage upwards, absolutely it can lead to burnout. So this is really where knowing your worth is super important. Then you apply the right guidance and the right tactics in a way that's going to bring you energy, is going to get your management into a position where they're willing to listen to you, and you can collaborate and drive change forward. If you continually try and try and try and try and it's just not working out, then you have the opportunity to say, well, hey, I know my worth. And in this organization, I'm not willing to or put in this amount of energy to correct this situation. I've done my best. I've applied guidance from, the book that I wrote and maybe others, but it's just not working out. And so it's time for me to move on.
Can you manage your own emotions when your boss is explosive?
Yeah, so early in my career, this was just how things were done. Right? Yelling and berating people, and giving them the once over verbally. That was just how you achieve results. And many managers didn't. If you weren't yelling at your team, then you're not getting the most out of your team. That was the actual philosophy, not kidding. And so I
Bobby Knight
sat through.
way of managing, right? The
Yeah,
Bobby Knight way.
that's right. And so I sat through many a dressing down, and I'm like, this is just how things are done. Now, I never adopted that myself, of course, but many people did. Many people were like, this is how you get the best from your teams, right? Otherwise, they're just kind of phoning it in. So the number one thing you have to realize is that when you're getting dressed down or when your manager is explosive, I have one that I talk about in the book called The Raw Nerve, right? These are emotionally volatile, reactive people. They swing between extremes. Their mood dominates team dynamics. Their staff feel like they must walk on eggshells. Empathy can be overshadowed by just instability. You never know where things are coming from, are going to come from next. These are all things that lead to just you kind of like just looking over your shoulder and just being generally unhappy. So the way to do this is to really get this manager to realize that that is not the best way to drive people. It's not the right tool. And again, focusing on empathy, figuring out like I know you want results and I know you feel that this is the best way to get it, but it's not the right way to get it. Here's what motivates me. Here's what motivates your team, and allow me to draw this bridge for you. Allow me to prove to you that on this particular project, this particular initiative, whatever it is, that we can do it without raising our voice. We can do it without you yelling. We can do it without with you being super supportive. It's one of the toughest conversations that you'll have, but if you do it diplomatically and with emotional empathy and emotional identification, it's possible. The number one thing to do is realize it's not about you. When you're being dressed down, you feel inadequate. You feel that this person is yelling at you because there's something missing from you. And listen, for everybody has room to grow, and they might be right, but approaching it that way is not right at all, and we know this now. And so making sure you don't take it personally and that you don't walk out of that meeting feeling defeated, that you try your best to deflect all of that vitriol and say, this is not about me. This is about this person feeling that they're out of control or this person unsure of whether or not they're going to get the best results. That's really what it's about. So don't take it personally. That's my biggest advice.
I think this will probably end up being our last question as we're running out of time here. And boy, it went fast. Can you give, and this is a question from the audience, can you give the top three characteristics of a bad manager and then a good manager? And do you think a bad manager can turn to a good one by just training, or they need to have good character to start off with? So is that trainable? Just like that's a question about entrepreneurship as well. Are people born entrepreneurs or they're not?
Boy, that's like, are leaders born or are leaders made? And the answer, I think,
Yeah.
in my opinion, is yes to, to both those alternatives. Um, right. So the first question, well, let me maybe start by the end. Yes, I think all managers can grow if they're willing to, if they buy in. And the best way to get them to buy in is to change their motivation, to understand it, and then to be able to change it and to give them self-awareness. Sometimes you're not going to be able to change them. Sometimes they're just at a point in their professional journey, because we're all on our journeys, in which they are not willing to receive any of this feedback, or willing to let go of the unhelpful tools. The other thing I'll say is, like, I don't like to refer to people as bad managers, bad employees, bad leaders. They are just leaders that in their own journey believe that the tools that they have are effective ones. And in reality, these tools in their toolbox for leadership are not effective. They are out of sync with what good leadership is. It's out of sync with how to drive results for people. It's out of sync with how to, build a collaborative workplace and to avoid toxicity. And I guess in terms of characteristics, I mean, I have 9 of them that I wrote about, right? There's the top three are people that poison the well with complaints. They forget about things because they're so overwhelmed. They are, I talked about the attack sub. I talked about the raw nerve. I talked about the order taker or the LIFO. These are all characteristics that come out for different reasons in different ways based on different challenges that people have and different element where they are on their journey. I do wholeheartedly believe that not only can they change with training, but you have the best. You actually have a pretty good chance of changing them on your own. Managing upwards is a real thing. It's something that I practice all the time. And with any good leader, the good characteristics are they will become the platform that you stand on. They will amplify you. You will stand on their shoulders. Those are the types of leaders that you want to grow your own leader into, or you want to seek out when you realize that, hey, I'm throwing good energy after bad, it's time to go somewhere else.
The book was great. I thought your answers to all these questions was spot on, especially for people who've been in the field for a long time. So I greatly appreciate you taking the time to spend with us and talk about your book and answer all these questions. So I wish you the best. I hope you'll write another book because you have a great common sense approach to how people should manage other people. So I thank everybody for coming this week, and we'll look forward to seeing you all next week. Take care, everyone.
Thanks for having me on. Bye bye.